Great. Hi, everybody. I am John Taylor. I'm a clinical social worker. My practice is just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I work with couples who have experienced infidelity or the discovery of addiction. I work with addicts, male and female, all sorts of places in their recovery journey. And I work with the trauma that weaves through all of that as well. And so in this webinar, I like to focus on what we can do at any stage in recovery to improve our relationships. Because for such a long time, a lot of people and a lot of relationships were kind of left hung out to dry, waiting for two healthy people to be able to get together and make a healthy relationship, which is actually not the recipe for a healthy relationship. It's two people where they're at right now, learning how to tune into one another and learning how to tune into their needs that makes a relationship work. So today we're going to continue talking about detours to connection. And today we're going to talk about stress in relationships. So stress is one of those words where it can be hard to define because everybody kind of knows what it is, and everybody uses this all the time. So we're going to talk about stress specifically that's external to your relationship. We won't be talking about conflict in the relationship, which is conflict is the word for stress that happens in a relationship. Stress is the word for stress that happens outside of the relationship. So for some obvious reasons, our levels of stress can really impact how we show up in our relationships and what goes on in those relationships. Think of how hard it is to come by compassion and to come by caring and patience when it feels like your personal house is on fire, when it feels like your own life or your income, your livelihood, your friendships, when those are crumbling around you. So knowing how to help each other with stress in a relationship is a really, really important skill for a relationship to have. A lot of the times with the couples that I work with, what started as a very external to the relationship stress then became an internal to the relationship stress because we got all sorts of conflict around how we showed up for each other or how we dealt with that. I hear all the time, not just from women about their husbands, but also husbands about their wives and men about the men that they're married to and women about the women they're married to, is my partner wants to fix me instead of help me. So this is a really common reaction to external stress, is to move in and try to alleviate the stress for our partner, which I think often looks like a very loving move, and it can be a very loving move. I think oftentimes when we don't help our partner very well with stress, it's because their stress stresses us out and we're trying to help ourselves. So we miss who's the subject there. We might make ourselves the subject when in fact we could offer some really effective help as an object. So what we're going to focus on today as far as the practical skills go is how to be a really helpful object, or a really helpful person to someone who's under immense amounts of stress. So there's three main parts to this, and the education part on this webinar is going to be short compared to what we've done, so get your questions ready. So there's three main parts to being a really good helper with outside stress. Number one, you have to listen. Number two, you have to ask questions. And number three, you have to be able to empathize. And you do all of this instead of jumping to a solution to the problem. So I don't know how many of you have seen that YouTube video, It's Not About the Nail. If you haven't, look it up, because it's a really good example, I think, for both parties of how difficult it can be to not jump into a solution and to just provide empathy. Long story short, the scene opens with this woman, it's back to this couple, and this woman is saying there's just so much pressure and so much pain, and it's there all the time. And as the camera moves, you get a profile of her, and there's a nail sticking out of her forehead. And then she says something like, "And my sweaters are always getting snagged." And then it switches to a view of her husband's face, and he's looking at her just like, and he said, "Do you think it has anything to do with the nail?" No, it's not about the nail. It's not about the nail. It's just so much pressure. And so finally, he says to her, "Okay, it's not about the nail. I get it. Like, there's a lot of pressure. Your head's always hurting. Like, that must be so hard. And she gets tearful and she says, thank you for understanding. And then, of course, they're feeling affectionate and she goes in for a kiss and then she hits the nail on his head and then she's like, ah, and he's like, how is this not about the nail? That's such a regular, I think, dance that we get into in our relationships. Is the solution may seem apparent to us. And we may be more oriented around why you came to me is because you needed a solution to your problem, versus why you came to me is because you needed another human being to feel validated by, or to listen to your experience, or to just witness with you. So the first point in there is listening. This is about really taking in what your partner is saying to you. Listening doesn't require you to agree. It doesn't require you to condone. It just requires you to be able to, on the very most basic level, to regurgitate back what your partner has said to you. You know, so the old active listening type stuff, what I'm hearing you say is, let me make sure I got this right. That kind of listening is super, super effective. And what it starts to do as far as reducing external stress to somebody is it helps that person to recognize, okay, I'm being attuned to here. I'm not alone in this. So that's where listening is really helpful. The second one is ask good questions. This can get tricky because oftentimes, especially when we feel like the solution is so obvious, we ask leading questions instead of open-ended questions. So we ask questions with an apparent answer, and we may be trying to do our very best to help by, well, let me help you arrive at this solution, but that misses the point again. Some of the most effective stress-reducing conversations I've ever had is when the person who was listening to me helped me get deeper into my own experience and understand it in a different way. So they could ask questions like, how do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? Or they might ask questions like, does this feel familiar to you? Have you run into this problem before? Questions that really help me to get into my own experience. And there's not an agenda behind those questions other than, I really want to understand this. So this is where listening and asking questions can come together. I really like taking the tack when I'm trying to help somebody with a problem. Instead of assuming that I've got it understood, I dumb it so down for myself. Okay, so you said that you were really stressed because you weren't sure where you were going to get the money to pay for groceries. You don't have the money to pay for groceries because you're not getting enough hours at work. And you had to spend your savings on some unexpected medical bills. And that makes it so you don't have what you need for groceries. Am I getting that right? You know, slicing it so thin and down to that granular level, it really helps a person feel listened to and witnessed, which is really what the third part is about, expressing empathy. That's being able to connect with some experience inside of us that may be similar to the experience the person is having, and to let them know we feel that. Gosh, that feels so heavy. That feels so sad. I remember being in a position where I didn't have money to last me through the end of the month. And I remember how stressful that is. I'm so sorry you're going through that. Notice how in there's no solution. There's no, and here's what you're going to do. There's this, it's deepening the, I understand you, I see you. And it's putting some of our emotions on the table, not to make the action about us, but to, again, further highlight that we understand what's going on with that person. I find in a lot of relationship interactions, once the listening, asking questions, and empathizing has happened, more often than not, somebody will ask, what do you think I should do? Or can you help me? That's the time to then maybe offer one piece of advice, or to offer one piece of help when it's asked for. And then that totally feels different to the person. Instead of this like, you don't want me to have my feelings and you want to shut this down. It's more like, you really understood me and I can tell you want to help. And so this is the skill set. And what I would encourage here in the practice here is, instead of looking at how do I get this for myself, which is a whole other matter, how could I give this to somebody in need? How could I give this to somebody who I have a connection with, I really care about? How can I practice that being a stress reducer for somebody, as a way to build a stronger connection in our relationship and to show up for somebody that I love? And I think when it comes down to listening, asking questions, and expressing empathy, there's actually very little that's required of us to give in that. Moving into a solution or moving into here's how you're going to fix it, that's a tall order. So compared to trying to fix somebody else's problems when they haven't asked for it, this costs relatively little. And I think it's something that's totally doable. So I'd encourage you to get out there and try some of this with a coworker, friend, child, a spouse or a partner, if you feel like you can, and just see how that changes the relationship feel for you, at least in that moment when your partner's stressed, to be able to be a good listener, ask good questions, and express empathy.
Great timing too, because I thought, we're coming into the holidays, and the holidays are compressed this year. So like I've noticed I've been stressed about, like you said, external things. Like I have no control over the schedule. I have no control over a compressed schedule from Thanksgiving to Christmas. So so I've been looking at how can I fix this and all that. One of the, I think it is so important to listen and ask good questions. But I was thinking too, it's like, you were talking about like not asking leading questions. So even figuring out what's going to be a good question, like I think I'd have to give it a pause and go, what's going to be a question that isn't just because I want them to get to see, here's the solution. Yeah. And then the other thing I was thinking about too with the empathize, when you were talking about, I remember when I didn't have enough money to make, I think that is really helpful. What I've experienced too often is somebody turning it to themselves and making it all about them, where I've had conversation and I was like, how does this person always manage to make it all about them? Like, and it leaves me cold. And so so it really does take practice to go, I share this with you, but like, it's not about me. It's just like, yes, I can relate to that. And I really liked, giving this to someone else. Like I said, this time of the year, there's so many people stressed out. Like if you just take a quick look around, you'll find somebody stressed out that you can practice this on. So to me, it's, really good skills. But like I said, it had an immediate reaction with the empathizing when I was like, oh no, I know people, names come to mind where they always manage to make it all about them, so.
Well, and you notice how that actually compounds the stress as I came to you for help and now I'm comforting you. So that's a really important boundary to watch for yourself when you empathize. For me to empathize with somebody around not having money at the end of if I were to start weeping on that and saying, oh my gosh, that's so stressful. I remember how that felt and that still traumatizes me, but go on, tell me. Like, there's no way that person is going to say like, oh, I feel heard. And like, you can still help.
Yeah.
This is hardwired into how we do relationships. When somebody's emotion overtakes, then that's who becomes the new subject. That's who it becomes about. So empathy isn't about bringing all the emotion to the table. It's about an acknowledgement. I know what that's like. I felt that before. It's not necessarily the expression of that intense emotion on the same level.
Thanks for clarifying. And that's exactly, it's exactly what I was thinking. So questions about this or anything, feel free to put them in the Q&A. It's your opportunity to ask John questions about relationships and how to have rockin' relationships if you're struggling with them. And like I said, doesn't have to be about a significant other. Could be, a coworker, could be, a family member. Again, coming up on holidays. So you may be going, I dread the holidays because I'm going to have to interact with this person. So.
Well, this is the time of year, if you have any kind of relational weirdness in any of your relationships, like it will come to the surface during this time of year. That's part of the magic of the holidays, is it boils everybody's dysfunction to the surface. So
it is challenging. Okay, so we've got a question. I've been in recovery with porn and sex addiction for a year. My wife caught me sexting online 2 years ago, which led to her finding out about my 12 years, married 20, of talking to other women, virtual sex massage parlors, and seeking casual encounters. I don't want to lose my wife. I've read Out of the Doghouse and I'm learning a lot. But what else can I do to ease the extreme pain that I see in her on a daily basis, even when she thinks she's hiding it? She's in therapy, reads and listens to many of the podcasts and books and videos. I know I can't change what I've done. The flowers, the dinners, the compliments, my adoration isn't working. Not even the expensive puppy I bought her. It kills me to see the shell of a woman she once was. Ooh.
You know what I think is really, really hard about this? Maybe in many other circumstances, the dinners, the flowers, the gifts, the puppy would all be seen as real big gestures of love. One of the things that signifies to me is, it might feel like a Band-Aid they're giving her. The answer is, how do I make her feel safe? Is you get in your program neck deep and you don't come up for air. Not that has to become your whole life and your whole identity, but the way that you show somebody that you can be a safe person after that kind of betrayal is you show them that you're taking it very seriously, not just taking their feelings seriously, but taking what you did very seriously. You know, for the majority of the people that I work with who are in those kind of lies and secrecies for an extended period of time, they're very out of joint with who they really are as a person. They're very out of touch with what they really value. And it's not just their loved one that they betrayed, they've also betrayed themselves. And to be able to do that to that level for that long, it means there's a lot of things that are out of joint for you. So this is where things like making sure you have a therapist and a recovery program. If you're involved in 12 steps or something like Smart Recovery, making sure that you're going to meetings multiple times a week, involved with a sponsor, that you're taking your self-care very, very seriously. That you're addressing issues in therapy, not just around addiction and betrayal, but also around some of your own emotional issues. Because for the vast majority of the addicts that I work with, addiction is it's an external solution to an internal problem. It's really not about the sex. It's really not about the hookups. It's about the emotional dysregulation. So getting to know your own emotional internal landscape, that's the kind of stuff that long-term can provide some assurance for a partner. And it's not because she sees you checking the list. It's because the way that you inhabit your nervous system starts to change as you heal. And when it gets to a point where it's changed significantly enough, not only can you feel it, but she could start to feel it too if she wants to tune into it. And that's the chance that you want to give her. So while the flowers and the dinners and the compliments and the adoration, those are all, I think those are all some well-intentioned reaches. They might be missing the point. She may know that you're sorry, but she doesn't need someone who's sorry and who's betrayed her. She needs someone who won't betray her again. And that's the work that you have to do, is to really, really dive into that and make sure that you know why it happened and what you're going to do about it on a daily basis to make sure that you don't have to cope in that way ever again. So I'm glad you're reading. I'm glad you've got resources. Intensives can be really helpful for this stage of recovery, especially if you want to take your recovery to a next level. And I know they have some of that through Seeking Integrity, right, Tammy?
Correct. Yeah, the next couples workshop is December 13th through 15th, and I'm happy to share more about that if you want to reach out to me. I'd be happy to share more about that. But, you know, I was thinking too, so thank you. You've read Out of the Doghouse, and I'm going to take it one more step. Hopefully you're following it, because for me, I can read something and then I can do something. So hopefully you're engaging with that. And honestly, I'm thrilled that you've got a year. Don't get me wrong, but she's got 12 years of, you know, you've done it this way. And so it's fragile. So, and Dr. Rob talks about, you know, it's easily, you know, a year or more before a partner, and that's of like, you know, no more trust, disintegrating behaviors. So like if you've been in recovery for a year, that's, you know, the clock started a year ago, and, you know, and so it's showing up, it's taking out the garbage, it's, you know, it's doing what you say you're going to do. And so she can start connecting the dots. I am thrilled that she's got a therapist, and she's, doing the podcasts and books and videos. That's all great stuff. So to me, I'm going, gosh, there's a lot of hope for the two of you, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
going to take some time. It's
Yep.
a healing process. I think, the couples workshop would be really helpful. It's, you both have losses to, you have the loss. She has the loss of what she thought she had, all these years, and you have the loss of this missed relationship. But there's a lot of success in recovery, with people getting it back. It's just, we as addicts want it now. I want it now. I want it to be all better now, and it isn't. It's, and I'm 100% with Jon. Really engaging in your program and doing your recovery stuff. That's all things that she will hopefully be able to see as you're doing what you need to do to make sure you don't relapse and do that to her again. So,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, hang in there. If you've been following along with Jon's series, there's lots of practical tools on, on how to work on your relationship. So, there's a comment. It seems to me this kind of empathy can work for self-validation. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by self-validation, but that is one of the things that I see happening in a real empathetic exchange, is both people have the experience of what's going on inside of me is reflected out there, and it makes it more real for us. That's as children growing up, that's a real developmental need, is to see our emotions reflected in the people around us. And I don't think we really grow out of that. I think we can become a lot more firmly rooted in, I'm feeling this and I don't necessarily need validation, but it's always nice. I think it's always appreciated. So, moving to a place of empathy isn't just about what you can give another person. It's also a gift of connection you give yourself. I can think of some times where in my own life, a long-standing story of hurt took on different meaning when I told it in the context of empathizing with somebody, or I
Oh,
told it in
wow.
the context of, I get what's going on for you, because there were parts of their experience and their emotions that, as I was telling the story, I could see reflected, and it made it more real for me. So yeah, it can definitely, it's not a one-way street. In fact, if what you're giving is a one-way street, that's more like sympathy. And that's actually a big driver of disconnection. Empathy is two hearts open, willing to connect.
Yeah, great. Okay, so next one. I am experiencing cognitive dissonance. I'm dealing with betrayal trauma, and my spouse had empathy for me for a few weeks, and now he left me and stopped all contact. And now I'm doubting his intentions. Was his empathy fake or real? He's a narcissist, but this year I saw a change in his behavior after I left him 2 years ago. I know narcissists do not have empathy, so I'm doubting myself. Is this silent treatment and punishment, or has he gained some awareness about himself and he is deeply ashamed? So,
First of all,
yeah, addicts are narcissists. So, it's hard to know if, somebody's a true narcissist, or if,
yeah.
all addicts are narcissists. So,
Well, I'm so sorry, first of all, to hear that he left you without
yeah.
any kind of explanation. That's got to be so, so painful. Um, for me, it may be less about what place is he in because he left, and it's more about, this is not an adult skill set.
Yeah.
Regardless of what's going on, something that reasonably functional adults can do is say, hey, I've got to check out. Like, I'm so overwhelmed with shame, and seeing you every day is incredibly painful for me. I've got to take a break, and I'm sorry because I know that this isn't good timing for you. That's one thing. Or even being able to say, you know what, I just don't have love for you, and I need to leave, and I won't be contacting you. Something we do in adult relationships is we give each other some closure. So that's the thing that's really concerning for me here. And I don't know, again, that you need to know his internal motivation for what's happening. Is just look at the outcome here. That this isn't a recovery responsible place, and that's probably some information that you need. I think when it comes for a spouse looking for empathy and looking for support from the partner who betrayed them, a few weeks is not enough time to be able to heal some of those wounds. And a few weeks, I've worked with guys in recovery who have said, I've been super attentive for the last 3 months and she's still so hurt. And it's like you had mentioned earlier, Tammy, you know, there's decades of betrayal here. So, you know, I'm very sorry to hear this. That's got to be so painful. And again, I don't know if you can figure out what's going on inside of him. Outside of him is not good recovery skills, and you're getting the brunt of that.
Well, and I don't know if he even is in recovery. I don't see that in the thread. You know, I hear the betrayed partner information as well. So, yeah. Unsure about that. Do want to honor you for being here. Hope you join, you know, Dr. Rob's live Q&A for more support tonight. And there are betrayed partner groups, you know, throughout the week. So please take this as an invitation specifically to connect with those. So, yeah, because what I hear in this is, you know, is he ashamed? Well, like John said, if he's ashamed, you know, he can say, I'm really ashamed. You know, is he doing something about it? Is he, you know, is he connecting with a 12-step? Is he getting therapy? Does he need a higher level of care? But for you, yeah, definitely painful. And like the whole doubting yourself, like, you know, I don't even know. I was like, I don't even think that's fair to go there. It's like, you know, you can, for me, I was thinking, I think I would accept that, you know, in the moment, it felt like he was genuine. I don't know if it was or not. But right now, you know, he's not showing up for himself or you. So that, you know, that's more concerning. So, my partner is in recovery, but it feels like I can't say much without him getting defensive. So I feel very depressed. I feel like there is not much I can say or do. I'm tired of it all, understandably. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say depression really comes from that feeling of prolonged helplessness, and that is unfortunately, I think, a common dynamic early in recovery. Is my spouse who's hurt me, who's betrayed me, they want nothing to do with, you know, my perspective or, you know, my pleas for, can you work on this? Can you look at that? What's this about? So that is a very, very tiring dynamic. You know, this is where I had an insight this over the last couple of weeks on what self-care really means. It's not just doing things that feel good or are fun or are stress relieving. Although those are really important in self-care. Self-care is the act of returning back to your solid home base. This is who I am. At the end of last week, I experienced the need for that very acutely. I'd had a week full of just a whole lot of pain in the sessions that I was conducting with clients, a whole lot of empathy that I was able to give. And I found myself on Thursday night, because Thursday is the last day that I see clients in the week. I found myself on Thursday night going to sleep and thinking like, gosh, am I depressed? Am I sad? And thinking like, no, I'm not depressed and I'm not sad. I've been with sad and depressed people all week and I've been feeling that. So I was really glad that I had a weekend plan that was really focused around connecting with something that I love and having an experience that I was looking forward to. And so with this, you know, that old like, well, make sure you're taking care of yourself and all of that. That's important advice, but do it for the purpose of coming back to you. You're hurt, you're tired, you feel out of options. And I think that's important to be able to feel and accept as a reality in your life, because your partner right now isn't giving you a lot of relational options. So find those things that really bring you back to a strong sense of yourself. What are your compass points? Where do you find meaning and purpose and passion in your life? And where your partner may not be open to, you know, pushing some of those boundaries for themselves or connecting there, that doesn't have to stop you from doing that. That doesn't have to stop you from developing that inner peace. And I hope you have some good ways to do that. You might want to catch some of the webinars that are available through the rest of the week. If there's support people that you can talk to, meetings you can attend, fun things that you can go do, something that's incredibly calming and connecting for you. Keep taking good care of yourself, because that defensiveness, it takes a while for it to budge. And for a lot of spouses, I think it's kind of this, I've been seeing this and I've wanted to talk to you about it for a long time, but you didn't let me. And that's unfortunately a very, very common experience.
One of the things that you've shared before, and a couple different times, and I keep coming back to that because I thought it was so powerful, is, to even be able to say, I want to be able to have these conversations with you. I know you're not able to do that right now, so I'm going to hold the space for this, but I think even just saying, I'm not expecting, I'm not looking for you to defend. I'm not looking for, I want to be able to do these things. You're not there right now. Okay. But I have this vision that, at some point we're going to be able to have a dialogue, and we're going to be able to do this without you feeling like you need to defend yourself. Or I'm not looking to attack. It's just, we're not there yet. But I think even getting it on the other person's radar that, oh, this is something and we want to move towards it. I can only imagine, you've shared a few different times that, having that, like, it'd be empowering for me to be able to say that, but it also puts the other person, it gives them the vision to be able to work towards.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay, the next one. My husband has been incapable of saying out loud that he is a sex addict. In therapy and between us, he uses vague verbiage to point towards his bad choices. I feel that he's not acknowledging that he's an addict, and it hurts and frightens me, understandably.
So my first question is he seeing an individual therapist who's working with him on sex addiction issues? It's not to say that he's definitely not a sex addict, but there's a lot of things that look like sex addiction that are not sex addiction. And I've run into that with clients I've worked before is they may have a spouse who really wants them to take on that label because for that spouse, that would provide a lot of security. Well, if you're an addict, then this is what you do. And, you can get into these groups and you can do this kind of program and we'll get some healing. So that's my first question of if he's working with someone, an individual therapist who's working with him on that. The follow-up question would be that if he is, have you talked to this therapist about what some of your concerns are, and about what you're experiencing in the relationship? Like I said, he uses vague verbiage to point towards his bad choices. Of course, that would hurt and frighten you, because when the most that I can give in an apology is I've done some bad things, that's not very reassuring because it doesn't tell you that I know what I did and that I know how to not do it again. So if he's got an individual therapist, I would see if it's possible to reach out to this person and share some of your concerns just for some information. I've also brought in spouses of addicts that I'm working with so that they get a sense of the work that we're doing. I've had some people in the same position, they won't admit it. And it's actually really validating for their spouse to come into session for me to say, I know I'm concerned too. And to be able to talk in a very real way about what's going on and what I see and what my concerns are with their partner. Some of the fear can come from, I'm the only person who sees this and I'm the only person who can hold him accountable for this. And that's a huge job for a spouse. This can also be a place where if he's having a hard time with the label, but he's open to some treatment. I mean, you guys are in therapy. An intensive could be helpful in just really taking a deep dive, getting some good diagnostics done, and really making sure that his therapy, his treatment is tuned into what it needs to be. Because it's one thing to not pick up a label that doesn't fit you, and it's another thing to resist a label because you're scared that it fits you, if that makes sense. So those would be some places that I would start. And again, definitely it makes a lot of sense that you're frightened by that. Personal responsibility is key in healing from and coming back from any kind of betrayal behavior.
So I just put in the chat links. There's some self-assessments, and they're just a little self-assessment tool. So it is not what we would use, clinically at Seeking Integrity Los Angeles. We go through it. We have a thorough, comprehensive assessment, to really understand what's going on with the person. But it at least gives a quick screening, and a lot of times people find that for them, they either do or don't have an issue. So I put up that in the chat. You can take a look at that. So this is, my partner isn't safe to get empathy from, being able to show empathy to myself. So
That's from that previous comment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How do I know if therapeutic separation is beneficial? What are dynamics a therapist looks for to suggest it?
Great question. Great question. So the number one thing when I recommend a therapeutic separation is when a couple is having a difficult time keeping their feelings and experiences separated from each other, not shutting each other out, but more like I watch you having your feelings and I get reactive to those feelings and then you get reactive to my reaction. So when it's this like I'm having a hard time feeling my own feelings and thinking my own thoughts when I'm around my spouse because maybe I'm busy managing them or maybe I'm worried about where their feelings might be. That's when I would recommend a therapeutic separation. Um, the goal of a therapeutic separation is not to take a step closer to divorce, is to preserve the relationship. So I've often seen couples do a therapeutic separation post-disclosure. And I encourage all couples I work with to explore that as a potential option as in the lead up to disclosure, because sometimes the information that you learn is so shocking that you need some time apart in order to process. I generally don't recommend a therapeutic disclosure when I know that one or both parties is actually moving toward divorce. I may recommend a separation, but I wouldn't call it a therapeutic separation because it's not therapeutic. It's in preparation for divorce. I also look for the commitment that both individuals have to their individual healing process and to the process of the relationship. So if if a couple is talking about a therapeutic separation and I know that one partner is not really engaged in their therapy or engaged in accountability, I have concerns about that, because what that may actually be is this partner moving closer to divorce and not telling their partner this is where they're going. So the therapeutic separation, while you have that space and time to feel your own feelings and think your own thoughts, you're really diving in with your individual support system and your individual therapist. There's generally a time in a therapeutic separation where there's a time period of very limited or no contact, but very quickly we move out of that into kind of reintroducing some connection. And so we may introduce some check-in phone calls. We may introduce a date night. We may, there's couples therapy going on throughout. That's another thing. Couples therapy doesn't stop during a therapeutic separation. In fact, we might even increase the amount of couples therapy going on to make sure that you're supported throughout there. So if you are having a hard time getting lost in the feelings of your spouse and the emotional life of your spouse and having a hard time tuning into your own, that's when you might want to consider it. In considering that, make sure that the therapist you work with, the therapist your spouse works with, and a marriage therapist, if there's that they all have a common understanding of what the therapeutic separation is for as well, because there's a lot of moving pieces in it. And you want to make sure that the whole treatment team is kind of bought into that and they're in communication with each other, so that you don't have two parts saying like, this is to preserve the relationship, and a third part saying like, okay, this is your window, you're going to get out. We really want, we want there to be some collaborative work on that.
So the next question, what is your professional thoughts, opinions of Lifestyle Recovery Program? So
I refrain from offering any opinions on any specific programs, but I can talk in general what I think makes a good program, and especially a good sex addiction program. So the first thing that I seek to give my clients that I work with, rather than saying this is my program, I want them to feel first connected to and understood by me. Because when it comes to sex addiction and intimacy disorders, or when it comes to sex addiction, that's what it is an intimacy disorder. I don't know how to connect and I don't know how to feel heard or seen in a relationship. So I like a program that can offer an individualized approach and a one-on-one experience with a therapist who can track you through beginning to end. I think the relationship with your therapist is incredibly important in sex addiction healing. I think it's important to look for a program that's open to complete assessment, meaning if you're going to call in and say, I'm a sex addict, I'm not going to necessarily just take you at your word. I'm going to say, oh, that's it. Okay, well, what makes you say sex addict? And I'm going to do some follow-up with that to verify that's exactly what's going on. In the area where I live, I get a lot of calls from people who, for a lot of them, any kind of sexual behavior that's outside of their cultural norm or outside of their professed sexual orientation, they'll say that's addictive, and it's not necessarily. And so also looking for a program that will do very thorough assessment, and making sure that that assessment is done by a qualified therapist. So it's one thing to have worked with a lot of sex addicts. It's another thing to have training specific to working with sex addiction, trauma, relationships. And those might be some of the things that you ask about. What are your specific qualifications for working with this? What specific training have you had? I also look for one of the things I think makes a good program is a program that's responsive to your individual needs and individual stories. So there's some adaptability to that. There's a lot of places that will profess, get porn free in X number of weeks. And there may be a subset of the population that works really, really well for. That doesn't mean that it works for everybody. So again, that thorough assessment, I think, is really, really important. So those would be the things that I would look for in getting that. I work with a lot of people who come to see me because somebody else had a good experience with me. That's one piece of information to go on. I've also had people contact me and they say, my friend has worked with you and they had a great experience. I know you're the right therapist for me. And as I talk with them, I know I'm not the right therapist for them. So while their friend had a really good experience, I know I'm not a good fit. And so I think it speaks really highly to any kind of program or any kind of therapist you're looking for who's willing to say, you know what, you do have a need here, but I'm not the one who's equipped for that. Let me help you get in touch with somebody who is. Because at the end of the day, the work that I do is for the benefit of the client, not for the benefit of me. So you could also ask around. If you know people who have been in the program, you could ask them, what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? If there's one thing you could change about this, what would you want to change about it? Ask a lot of opinions. And then also finding the right program for you is not a matter of I found it right out of the gate. Now I just need to go with it. You might need to shop around. So at the end of the day, there may not be a whole lot of harm in trying something out with the understanding that you may find it's not a good fit. And I think that can be a really helpful part of anybody's recovery, to have the experience of recalibrating when the road I went down actually doesn't meet all of my needs. That's okay. That definitely happens. And in fact, I think if that's not happening in your recovery, you may not be tuned into your own needs. So that would be how I would answer that one.
A few more things, like even just your last point is like, even if something is, it might be a great fit for you now and you may outgrow it. But check into the training, because there are a lot of programs that are, I call them DVD in a box. Like the therapist gets trained by listening to some DVDs and that's it. And so really investigate. So if they go, well, I completed this program, well, go look into what that program involves. Because they're not all the same. I think that's really important. And, I know a lot of therapists and I know some in the Lifestar program, and, I refer to them, but I don't refer to like, there's no one training that I refer to all of their therapists, even the CSAT. And we talk about CSATs. There's a lot of CSATs, quite frankly, and I don't care that this is recorded, that I will never refer to, so, but there's a lot of great CSAT therapists. So it really is on an individual basis, and getting the information on that particular therapist. And then also if they're part of a practice, what is, do the objectives and what they say they do, is that what you're looking for? Or is that what you're looking for now? And then, a year or two down the road, you go, well, that was great, but now I'm in a different place and I need something else. Great. Or they help you even, say, okay, now you need this and we don't offer that. So, whatever. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. Next question. In betrayal trauma, I do feel that my emotions take over, hijack the conversations I have with my 9 months in recovery spouse lately. Conversations seem to revolve around how difficult all the betrayal is for me to digest. sometimes unbearable. My sadness is palpable. My spouse is supportive in these moments, just being present for me. Do you have suggestions on how I can move away from this dynamic in dialogue with my recovering spouse, as he has pain too? I am in 12-step program, participating in online groups and seeing a therapist.
Yeah, really great start, really great foundation to that. And I think getting some help specifically with the betrayal trauma, not just how it affects your brain, but how it affects your body. This is where I see is the most tied to this kind of dynamic. It's not that I want to go here. It's that my body has this big reaction, and I may even know in the moment that it's happening that this is not the reaction for this moment. So you might want to talk with your therapist about some modes for addressing the betrayal trauma itself and how it shows up in your body. Something like EMDR, somatic experiencing, even like a cognitive processing, just something that helps your body and brain to move away from that stuck point. That may be helpful at this point. And keep in mind too, that Tammy, I have your voice in my head right now. 9 months is an accomplishment. It's also not a very long time. So there may be some parts of your reaction that are definitely an overreaction. They're not necessary right now, but some of the pain may still be really, really fresh for you. So being able to move to a place of complete inner peace and no interpersonal problems when you're interacting with your spouse, that may not be quite where you're at right now. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're not going to get there at some point, or that you're doing something to hold it up. Something like the somatic stuff and the EMDR may help some of the extra baggage to fall away, and for you to get a lot clearer on what the hurt actually is for you right now and what you need right now. But that would be where I would take a look right now, is what's ready to move in your body, and seeing if you can get some help there.
Yeah, and I think, and we've talked on different webinars and things, but EMDR, if there's some really specific things, it can be helpful fairly quickly. Like when it's this whole long pattern, then there's more to it. But even picking like, these are the things that are the most troublesome for me, and and doing some work on that may just help eliminate or at least reduce, the sadness. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Rob talks about, a year and a half of, of all of that, and grieving the loss, like you're talking about the betrayal and the sadness, this is a huge loss. So like, if you are thinking, I had this relationship with this person and, they're my partner and we're in this together and all this, and then you find out all of this stuff and you go, wow, like everything I thought, isn't the case. So now I've got to grieve the loss of what I thought I had and what I should have had. So, and
unfortunately, the reality is it's hard to get to a place of inner peace without grief, and that might be a big part of what you're going through.
Yeah.
So there can be a big difference between grieving with a partner and lashing out on a partner. And if you're lashing out and you want to change that, like, definitely talk with your therapist. If it's part of the grief, there's some of this like walking through these very tearful, maybe even sometimes like anger-filled conversations that actually is part of the grief. This is a big loss for you, and a big loss for your relationship.
Well, in the couples workshop that that we offer, one of the goals is grieving losses together, and so I think that's a really critical piece of it too. So, okay, so the next question. I am with a partner for 14 years and he was always very harsh and abusive with me, never had any empathy. So this year I really saw a change and wanted to really commit and make his rights wrong. At least he gave me that impression. He is not in recovery and I'm really worried for him. I should be angry and furious, but I really feel bad for him, not to fix him, but overall concerned. And I want to go pro-dependence. Of course you love him. You see,
yes.
You see all of that. So, and I'm sorry, but like when I read I should, like I have found shoulds just to be judgmental, like that ends up making me feel bad about myself because I didn't do whatever. And like, so I would encourage you to just look at it of like, you're worried about him. Understand you're worried. You've got 14 years with this person, and you saw some changes, in him. and now he's gone AWOL from what you shared
Mhm.
earlier. He's, off the grid. So John, thoughts?
I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say is, of course you're worried and of course you're concerned. I don't think there's ever this is the time to feel anger. This is when I should feel furious. There's a lot of loss in here too. I think it's sad when somebody walks away from a promising path because maybe they can't stand that feeling of getting honest or connected or vulnerable or whatever. I always think that's tragic. So yeah, pro dependence all the way here. Definitely makes sense you're feeling that way, and that doesn't necessarily set you up for failure in the future to feel this way about someone that you've taken a 14-year journey with.
Yeah, yeah, and the anger and furious, may come tomorrow, but right now I
Yep.
understand you being worried and concerned. So, comment, thank you for your webinars. They are helpful in my journey in recovery from betrayal trauma. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, he's in recovery for porn and Dex addiction. So that would, because I said I'm not sure if he's in recovery or not. So he is not an addict except workaholic, but a real narcissist. I have studied him and narcissism in depth. So, okay. Lifestyle, I guess I meant versus SA 12-step use in conjunction with therapy.
Yeah, so 12-step is different from therapy, group therapy or individual therapy. And for me, it's never a matter of which one should I do. It's when should I do it? Because they all give you something. Occasionally I'll get a call from someone who thinks that they need some therapy, but they're not quite sure that that's the route they want to take. And I'll tell them, you might want to go to 12 steps for a while and see if you really identify with the kind of change that other folks in your position might be working towards, and see if you identify with this whole label of addiction. There's other folks who start in therapy and it comes to a point where we'll be looking and saying, I think you've done just about all you can do on your own, and now you need to get connected with some supportive relationships, and groups are the right move for you. So I don't, and the research doesn't really support this. I don't think there's one road to recovery that's superior to others. Again, I think it's about what's offered here. Do I need that? And when's the right time to use it?
Yeah, in my opinion, checking out more, I went to treatment, I had individual therapy, I had group therapy, I still go to my 12-step groups. It's important for me. I have cupboards and desk full of recovery stuff. I engage on some level, some sort of recovery, something every day, even if it's just thinking about my gratitude list of everything I'm grateful for. So it, to me, really is part of my overall life process. But, I probably almost rant when I share, but when people go, yes, I'm in recovery, I'm going to see my therapist every week, period. I'm like, because, I'm like, gosh, I sure spent a lot of time planning my acting out, remembering my acting out, well, what I could remember. And, and just the whole cycle. Like when I got into recovery, I had hours every day, and I needed to replace that with healthy things. And so it really is, the more good things I did, the better chance I had, and the less I was sitting there feeling sorry for myself that, I can't act out anymore. So,
Yep.
Congratulations on your badge at the beginning of the webinar. I shared today's my recovery birthday, so I shared my chip. Do you have any tips, advice for severe brain fog? So, John.
My first piece of advice is get into your body as much as possible. Brain fog to me is it's a real collapsing of some of those, internal cognitive structures, and using the body to help move through that is really, really helpful. So exercise, yoga, meditation, breathing. And just like with regular fog, there's no amount of blowing or pushing that's going to make it clear. Like you have to put yourself in a position to watch it move out. And so I'd also say be really patient with yourself, because any kind of internal pressure you have is going to make it that much harder to get clear. But start with practicing some things in your body again. exercise, yoga, meditation, breathing, mindfulness, that kind of stuff. Let your body help you process through and hold some of that.
Yeah, and there's I'm not good at, the mindfulness and meditation, but I've done some guided ones, and those were super helpful for me because that was not something
Yep.
that was natural for me. And so just listening to somebody's soothing voice that talks me through all of that, then I was able to connect and, like the whole, just kind of feeling all the way down, I mean, it was really interesting and good for me. And it sure made me more in touch with what's going on, internally. So, final
Yeah.
question. Can EMDR work if you are still in an abusive relationship?
Yes, just calibrate your expectations. It won't change your relationship. It may change your experience of your relationship, and that could go either way. I've done EMDR with clients who've been in an abusive relationship, and one person that I worked with, it kind of moved her to a place where she said, I can't continue in this relationship as I am. And so she developed some boundaries, and she, through EMDR, developed some internal structures that weren't there before. I've worked with other people who have reached the conclusion, I can't tolerate being in this relationship anymore because it's abusive, and the EMDR helped them get there. And then everything in between. Because what EMDR is designed to do is to move some very specific blockages for you, some very specific emotional ties to what's not working. But what those blockages are, what those ties are, what that movement looks like is anybody's guess. It's very rare that I do EMDR with somebody where something doesn't change. It's very often that I do EMDR with somebody and they're shocked at what changed. For me, 3 years ago at the end of an EMDR session, I came home. We didn't even talk about this. I came home and said, I think I really want a dog. After a lifetime of saying, I don't want a mammal in the house and dogs are the most disgusting thing. Whatever it was we worked on opened me to having something that needed my attention and my care and my compassion, and understanding that that would be a good thing for me. So it's always surprising where it goes. But it definitely helps to move things.
And for me, when I personally did EMDR, it was on old stuff, so,
Yeah.
so it was on pre any, significant relationships in a spousal type of way. It was old stuff and that was hugely freeing to me,
Yeah.
just from that standpoint too. So, I have found it to be super helpful for me personally. In fact, and I've shared this before too, I would have this white hot rage. I called it, I had it labeled because it would come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden I would just feel this rage, and I knew I had to stay away from people because I'm sure emanated off me, and they probably would have burned up, but it was unexpected. I couldn't tell when it was going to happen. And so I would just be isolating to try to just calm myself down and everything else. And I did some EMDR around that, have not experienced any of that since that time, which was, like I said, hugely freeing for me because, that was so out of control. So. Okay. Well, Jon, thank you very much. So we'll be off next week. And then when we return, watch the schedule because Jon's going to be on the 2nd and 4th Tuesdays of the month at a different time period. So thank you all. Thank you for the great questions. We appreciate that. Jon, thank you. Wishes for you and your family for a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you
Thank you.
in December. So
Thanks, everybody.